Now, the young Michelangelo started with this sculpture here. He, of course, lost his mother at a very young age, so he was raised like a foster child from another group, family of stonemasons. So that's where he learned a lot of his sculpting skills from just a little boy. And then, of course, this was his very first piece. At this time, you didn't sign your work. Everything you did was divinely inspired, and everything you created was a gift to your community or to humanity. So Michelangelo wheeled this out into the public for everyone to see and watch, step back and listen to everyone marvel at this beautiful sculpture. And they kept asking who did it, and they gave credit to another artist. And this devastated the young Michelangelo. He could not believe that someone else was getting credit for it. So in the middle of the night, as the story goes, he snuck into the chapel, the little church where they put it, and he carved right into Mary's sash here, Michelangelo did this. So great story, and it really did start a lot of artists signing their work. So, they didn't lose credit for their hard work. This is an amazing piece, and it really helps us understand the brilliance of his abilities. You look at scale and proportion here. Scale is the relationship of one object to another, and proportion is the relationship of parts to the whole. And if most people don't notice that Mary is giant. If a large adult were to lay in your lap like this, they would be falling. They would not fit. But Mary is almost twice the size, 3 times the size as Jesus, which is how he sits comfortably in her lap. Well, we don't notice it because the folds and drapes in her robe hide her actual size. They said if this Mary were to stand up, she'd be over 8 feet tall. So that really shows you the amazing, but we don't notice it. So this is kind of amazing. Later on, he gets in trouble with the Inquisition because they talk about how young Mary's face is there, and he defends himself very well. Michelangelo was very good politically. He worked for 2 different popes. In fact, David was a political piece. This is known as the Colossal David because look at the size. It's over 17 feet tall, intended to be seen from a distance. Now, David is a symbol of Florence. It's the idea of brain over brawn. So the story of David and Goliath, the little guy beating up the big guy, is a story that the Renaissance community loved in Florence. So David actually represented the Republic and the rise over the Medici, this famous family that we'll talk about. Michelangelo actually moved in with Lorenzo Medici later on, and Lorenzo was a great patron of the arts, and his sister Catherine was a great patron of music. So it was a very powerful family. Probably one of the most powerful families in history was the Medici. Nonetheless, though, they did come back into power, but they love this sculpture here so much. Later on, he was commissioned to paint the Sistine Chapel, which he hated. He was a sculptor, not a painter. But when the Pope asks you to do something, you do it. So he had many assistants that helped him. He painted the Sistine Chapel. You can read all about the agony and the ecstasy. He wrote a poem about the Sistine Chapel because it really did drive him crazy. Later on, I guess he came to terms with painting more because he painted the back wall here. And of course, he was brought before the Inquisition on this one too, because of all the nudity in it. And one time they even painted drapes, red drapes over all the nudity. Now it's restored back to the original way Michelangelo intended it to be. But you can imagine how backbreaking, literally backbreaking, painting a ceiling with all these biblical scenes with the creation of Adam in the center there. And you have a guy that shows you all the different scenes there. So these are all biblical scenes in the Sistine Chapel. And there are other very famous artists that painted in the Sistine Chapel here. You might recognize, here's Palladios right here. So you might recognize these in your book. Michelangelo painted the ceiling and the back wall. Okay, the Sistine Chapel. So very, very famous chapel. That's a beautiful scene that everybody loves so much. And this, of course, is the back wall. Yeah, they really did. Pope Clement criticized the nudity in this one. Now you can see those red drapes have been removed, most of them, but at one time they were covering all the figures. And this, of course, is kind of a sombering theme. It's Judgment Day. Very very apocalyptic. Now, like Leonardo, Michelangelo excelled in many, many areas. He was an expert drawer. He was an expert sculptor. His painting, he wound up having to do. And then he, later on in life, he really understood the third dimensional world. So he became a great architect. And the final design for St. Peter's Basilica was not Michelangelo's, but the architect that finished after him took some of Michelangelo's ideas and had a major influence on it. So that's the St. Peter's Basilica that Michelangelo designed when he was chief architect of the Vatican. So he really did excel in many, many areas.